Hello, welcome back to Broyhill on Aviation Leadership. This is episode 7 of the Leadership Traits series, and in this episode, we're going to examine the leadership trait of transparency. So, let's get started. Now, several of the traits we've discussed thus far in this series have had multiple definitions that did or did not really apply to what was at hand, and in most cases, I've omitted those when I've given you the definition slide or when we've had our discussion about what those definitions are. However, for this definition, I think it's important to actually include the physical definition as well as the non-physical one. And for that, I've got a prop. So, here's a piece of cling wrap. You can get that in any store, saran wrap, if maybe you call it, or Glad wrap. It's transparent. It means you can see through it, and that's what the first definition says. It says having the property of transmitting light without appreciable scattering, so the bodies lying beyond are seen clearly. You saw me clearly through the wrap. Allowing for the passage of a specified form of radiation, such as X-rays or ultraviolet light, fine or sheer enough to be seen through. And then we come to the definition that we're probably most acquainted with in the context of leadership. Free from pretense or deceit, easily detected or seen through, readily understood, characterized by visibility and accessibility of information, especially concerning business practices. So you see, this definition from Merriam-Webster even has a business context in the way it's phrased. But there's probably a deeper dive, as you might suspect, that we can take. As you might expect, the great Stephen R. Covey has a few words to say about transparency. And I really like the way he discusses it here because it ties the two definitions we saw in the previous slide together. Transparency, he says, is about being open. It's about being real and genuine and telling the truth in a way people can verify. It's based on the principles of honesty, openness, and integrity, and authenticity. Here's where it gets interesting. I also like to include the principle of light, he says, because when something is transparent, light will flow through it. In the words of former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, sunshine is the best disinfectant. It cleanses. It dissipates the shadows. It casts out the darkness. It enables people to see. It gives them a sense of comfort and confidence because they know there's nothing being hidden. Now think about that in a leadership perspective. Think about how that would open up the culture of an organization with transparency from the top to the bottom. In the 2019 survey, I defined transparency very simply for the respondents. I said, doesn't keep secrets. And you can see how the overall mean, the leaders mean, and the followers mean came out. Now, you would look at the differences between the leaders mean and the followers mean, and you'd be tempted to say that the followers thought more highly of transparency than the leaders did, but then you can see that Levine's test for variance does not provide a significant result. Ergo, those means are not statistically significantly different. And from a rating perspective, we see that both leaders and followers ranked transparency as their number 7 attribute. So pretty good alignment on those two areas. For this week's personal reflection, I will again provide you an example from my past that's not terribly flattering in the hope that maybe you can learn from it and do better. Many years ago, I was director of aviation for a flight department that grew very rapidly. We started with 1 airplane and about 6 people, and within the space of less than about 3.5 years or 4 years, we went all the way up to 5 aircraft, multiple locations, and over 30 people. At the beginning, when you've just got a few people, the culture of transparency as part of your organizational culture is pretty easy to maintain. Everybody knows everybody, everybody's always talking to each other, the information flows freely, nobody feels like anything is being hidden or that there are any agendas being presented. However, over time, if you don't pay attention, that culture can deteriorate, and that's what happened to me. Over time, people got hired who knew each other, and cliques began to form, factions began to develop, sides began to be taken. And my leadership team, I naively assumed all the information I was getting from my leadership team was correct about what was going on with the rest of the organization. And I learned later, to my shock, that it wasn't. I was getting biased information, and the culture of transparency had nearly completely deteriorated. And along with that deterioration, the trust in the organization, the trust in me, the trust in leadership had similarly gone away. It took a massive reconstruction effort and me actually talking to every single member of my organization to try to restore that feeling of transparency and assuring them that I wanted them to know everything I possibly could tell them. but it was a long road back, let me tell you. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is just because you have a culture of transparency today doesn't mean you'll have it tomorrow unless you work at it. It takes work. It takes diligence. It takes paying attention. It takes making sure that you can trust what you're hearing and making darn sure your people can trust what you're telling them. Stephen R. Covey said something in the section at the back of this chapter where he talks about how you should handle transparency in an organization. I found it very interesting. He said, when in doubt, err on the side of disclosure. I.e., if you're wrestling with telling your people something or not telling them, you should tell them, because that creates trust. It creates a bond within the organization, and it maintains that culture of transparency. Think about that. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Leadership Trait Series. Next week's episode will be about the leadership trait of vision, one of my personal favorites. Remember, if you don't want to miss any of them, just click the subscribe button here at the bottom of the page and you'll get alerts every time a new one of these videos comes out. If you'd like to get more information about the leadership traits and how they are implemented by some awesome leaders in our industry, you can buy the book as well that appears on this page. You can buy it on any online retailer, and I'll send you a signed copy if you go to my website and order it. And again, all of the proceeds and profits go directly to the Leadership Conference Scholarship Fund. Nobody's making any money on this. It's a labor of love for the industry. So until next week, stay well, stay safe, and tailwinds.